Hello everyone and welcome back to another video. Today I'm going to be talking all about breastfeeding. Before I had a baby, I was completely clueless how much actually goes into breastfeeding. Pretty much I thought your boobs filled up with milk and then the baby drinks from it. That's all I thought. But I was so wrong. There is so much to breastfeeding. So I thought I would make this video for any of you first-time moms that are just really curious to know what's gonna happen when you start to breastfeed. I want to first talk about the beginning stages of breastfeeding. This is what's most likely going to happen to you. Not saying that this is how it happens for everyone, but this is the most common thing, if that makes sense. What happened to me, and I think what happens to most women, is a few weeks or days before you give birth, you produce some liquid that is called colostrum, and you only produce a little bit of this. It's just like a clear, has like a kind of a yellowish tint to it, but it is so good for your baby. It has so much nutrients in it, and your baby really only needs a little bit. But for me, it came in about a week before I gave birth. I know for some women, it can come kind of anywhere in their pregnancy. So first off, you'll have that, and then it takes about 2 to 3 days before your milk comes in. When your milk first comes in, for me anyway, it felt like my boobs were going to explode. They just filled up so fast and you get so engorged. And that is where most often women will get stretch marks. For me, that's how it was. I didn't have any stretch marks on my boobs at all until my milk came in, and that's where I noticed a bunch of stretch marks, which is very normal because it really just comes in like that, and your boobs are like 2 times the size as what they were before. I mean, if I could give you guys any tip, I guess really try to moisturize. I don't know if it's gonna help a whole lot, but I mean, sometimes you're just gonna get stretch marks, and that's okay. There's nothing wrong with stretch marks, and they fade. I personally think stretch marks are beautiful. Another thing is when you first start to breastfeed that I didn't know happens is you actually have the feeling of contractions. And the reason is because when you breastfeed, it really helps shrink that uterus back into place. And so like when you're giving birth, you start to contract because everything's expanding. And so when you're breastfeeding, everything is starting to go back into place. And so you do feel those contractions, which I had no idea. I remember when I was first nursing Everly, I was like, oh my goodness, I am cramping so bad, and it hurts. It feels like a contraction. And they were like, yes, because your uterus is shrinking, and I had no idea about that, which is actually really neat. The woman's body is just so amazing how God created it. Another frequent asked question is, does it hurt? Like, does it hurt when your boobs fill up with milk? It is such a weird feeling when you have your letdown. The best way I can describe it is, you know that feeling you get when your feet fall asleep and they start to tingle? That's kind of the best way I can describe it. It's just like this really tingling sensation. And I know for some women, they say that it hurts, that it kind of burns, but I haven't personally experienced that. The only time it ever hurts for me is when they get engorged, which happened to me very often in the first month or 2. I'm a lot more regular now, so I don't really get engorged too often, unless sometimes in the morning I will, but really that's the only time. How often does the baby need to nurse? When Everly was first born, she was nursing about every 2 hours, but she wasn't on like a super set schedule. I pretty much just let her nurse whenever she wanted to, but usually it was around that 2-hour mark is when she would get hungry again. Now that she is just about 4 months, she goes about every 3 to 4 hours, But again, really, I just let her nurse whenever she's ready. So whenever I start noticing any of her hunger cues, that's when I will start to nurse her. Are there any foods that I need to avoid while nursing? There's really not too many foods that you need to avoid. I know you need to avoid fish that are high in mercury, which I personally don't eat a whole lot of fish, so I don't really have that issue. The next thing is just, you know, the normal like caffeine, coffee, tea, and sodas. Just make sure that you're keeping those to a minimum, but it is okay to have like coffee, like a cup a day or whatever. But just know that whatever you're eating is what your baby is getting. That also kind of determines what they will be more drawn to when they get older. Which side do I nurse on first? What I do and what they had told me do is you rotate. Say for the first feeding, I start on the left side and then I go to the right. For the next feeding, I will start with the right and then go to the left side. And I just kind of go back and forth. That way, your milk production will be even. Mine isn't totally even. I don't know if this is a normal thing, but I do notice I get a little bit more milk on my left side than I do on my right side. It's not that much of a difference, but I do always notice that my left side is a little bit fuller than my right. Another thing that a lot of women talk about in the first month or so is how their nipples hurt really bad. I never really experienced that too much. It never hurt me too bad really there. Mostly for me, what hurt so bad was the contractions and the cramping. But I realized that the reason, if it ever does hurt your nipple area, that is due to your baby not having a good latch. Everly had an amazing latch right off the bat. She just got on there really good. I didn't ever have too much problems. She just has a hard time like getting latched, but once she's on there, she's good. So I never had any of those issues with like super chapped nipples or bleeding or anything like that. But I know a lot of women do, and that's usually due to not a good latch. How do I know if my baby has a good latch? They say that you want to make sure that the baby's mouth is totally around the nipple and then also mostly around the areola too. The next area that I wanted to talk about was pumping. So after I had Everly, they asked me if I had planned to pump, and I was like, yes, I do plan to pump, and they told me to wait, which I am so happy they did. I didn't understand why they had me wait, but now I do. And that is due to something called nipple confusion. And what happens is if you give a baby a bottle too soon, they might start to like the bottle a lot more than nursing, because usually babies, when they drink from a bottle, it's a lot easier than nursing. And so they were like, make sure that you get her on a regular schedule and used to nursing before you introduce a bottle. That way it just makes it a lot easier for you guys, and I'm so happy that I did. I waited about 6 to 8 weeks before I ever gave Everly a bottle. I would definitely recommend, if you are planning on pumping, to wait about 6 weeks before you introduce a bottle. The only time I ever used a pump before introducing a bottle to Everly was when I was extremely engorged, which would happen quite often. And I would pump just to relieve some of that milk so that I wasn't in so much pain. And then I just would freeze it, and I have it saved for Everly if I ever need to use it. Another thing that I want to talk about is the Haka cup. If you guys haven't heard of the Haka cup before, it is an awesome little device. Something that I didn't know happened to you before I was nursing. When you are nursing on one side, the opposite side tends to leak. Some women it leaks a lot, some women it just leaks a little bit, and some women it doesn't even leak at all. But for me, I do have a lot of leakage. I don't know if that has anything to do with your milk production or just how your body is. I'm not really sure. But what the Haka cup does, it is this like little suction bottle type thing, and it just like suctions to your opposite boob, and it catches all that leakage so you can save it, which is so awesome. I had no idea how much I was actually leaking until I started using it. I'll get an extra 2 ounces from a feeding just from using the Haka cup. So I would really highly recommend that, especially during your first month. That's when you have the most milk, and you can definitely build up a really good supply from that. Another question a lot of people have different opinions about is nursing in public. I'm gonna be totally honest with you guys, okay? So before I knew how truly hard it was to nurse, anytime I would see women protesting about nursing in public, I just didn't realize what a big deal it was. Like, if I saw a woman nursing in public, I personally wouldn't think twice about it, but I know a lot of people had a lot of issues with this. For me personally, I do not feel comfortable with just like whipping my boob out in front of anybody and everybody, but I get why women do it. It is not a sexual thing. When I'm nursing a baby, I'm not thinking about being sexual. I'm thinking about my baby needs to eat. This is how my baby lives. And if people have an issue with that, they don't have to look, especially if you have a cover on. Like, that's just totally insane. Like, I'm feeding my baby. Like, for me personally, if I am in public, I will cover up. But then again, I do kind of get why women just want to just like whip it out, because it's hard, especially when you're new at it, when your baby's new at it. And then just adding a cover into the mix, it is just hard because you need to see what they're doing, and a lot of times with a cover you can't really see, and then they get really hot and they get overwhelmed and you're overwhelmed, and then you're just like, it's just a lot. So, or like in the summertime it was getting really hot, so I couldn't just go out in the car. So I get it. And my thing is, for the people that are gonna hate on women that are just trying to feed their baby, then that's their problem. But yeah, that's kind of my view on that a little bit. If you are like me and you do prefer to be a little more modest, and you are past that 6-week mark where you are able to give your baby a bottle, what I like to do is bring my pump with me in the car, and if I know we're going somewhere that everybody's going to be hungry soon, I'll just pump in the car and then have a bottle warm and ready for her wherever we are. Mastitis is something you can get when one of your milk ducts is clogged, and it sounds pretty awful. I've never experienced this, but I have seen pictures of what it looks like, and it is definitely something I never tend to get. It sounds awful, looks awful, and I know you get really, really sick, and you can get a fever, and if it gets bad enough, then you need to go to the hospital and they'll put you on an antibiotic. Just make sure that when you're nursing, to make sure you're getting all of your milk out, because you definitely do not want to deal with that. And then if your baby does not drink all of it, because sometimes they get full and they don't want to finish, that's when I would pump, because you definitely want to make sure you're emptying yourself out. Is it okay to nurse when I am sick? And yes, 100%, you should definitely nurse when you are sick. Most likely when you're sick, your baby has caught whatever you got, and nursing actually will help them fight whatever sickness it is. So 100% yes, continue nursing your baby. Should you kiss your baby? Probably not, but nursing, yes. Will I get my period when I am breastfeeding? For me, I have not had a period yet. I know that a lot of women won't get their period until their baby is starting to eat more foods. And then that also brings the false assumption of, is breastfeeding another alternative of birth control? And no. Definitely, if you are not trying to get pregnant while you're breastfeeding, I would not rely on breastfeeding, because I know multiple people actually that got pregnant while they were breastfeeding. They say that it can be harder, but I would definitely not rely on that, because you can definitely get pregnant while you're breastfeeding. But I just want to encourage any of you women that are struggling with breastfeeding, don't be too hard on yourself. Do the best you can but that's all you can do. As long as your baby is being fed, that's all that matters. It is such a miracle how we are able to grow a human being inside of us and then birth a human being, and now the baby solely relies on us for food. Like, I was just really thinking about that the other day with Everly. Everly has not had any other food besides me. That just blows my mind how such a miracle that is. And if you are on the fence debating if you want to breastfeed or not, if you are able to, do it, because yes, there are a lot of struggles that come with it, and yes, it can sometimes be easier just to give your baby formula, but if you can breastfeed, do it, because there's so many amazing benefits that go along with breastfeeding, and also just that bonding experience is so amazing. But also, if you are unable to breastfeed, don't be hard on yourself. As long as your baby is getting food, that is all that matters. And maybe this time around you are unable to breastfeed, but that doesn't necessarily mean next time around that it's going to be the same way. For my mom, there was 5 of us, and she said with every baby it was totally different. She said sometimes she would underproduce, other times she would overproduce, and then sometimes it was just right. So every baby is going to be different. I just want to encourage all of you mamas out there, breastfeeding or not, you are doing an amazing job, and you are incredible, and you got this. That is all of the questions that I'm going to be answering today. If you guys have any other questions, please leave it in the comments below and I will do my best to answer you. I am not a professional, so if you have any major questions, please consult with your doctor. Thank you guys so much for watching. Please don't forget to like and subscribe. Also turn on my post notifications so you guys are notified every time that I upload. I hope you guys have a wonderful day or night or whenever you are watching this, and I will hopefully see you guys in my next one. Bye guys.
Missing someone